Going into 2020, I thought I'd just cover the fundamentals of music marketing. And if you watch this channel, then all of the tips, tricks, hacks, techniques that we give you on this channel are going to be absolutely irrelevant if you don't know these fundamentals. You see, since the start of music marketing hasn't changed. The way people discover music, the way that they become a fan of a particular artist, and that artist stays at the very top, from literally going from emerging artist to the mainstream, hasn't changed. But what has changed is the platforms that are available to artists and labels in order to facilitate this method of marketing. It is still the same, except say in the 1970s, you had press, radio, support slots, and television in order to promote an artist. So you would initially discover an artist on these platforms and also find out about their story and fall in love with them using these exact platforms. How you implement this method is completely up to you. The techniques you decide to use should be for you as an artist. Don't try and copy another artist's route to success, because every artist has a different route and something that they maybe got a little bit lucky or found something that worked for them, and that is what broke them as an artist. So on this channel, we have hundreds and hundreds of videos telling you different techniques in order to break as an artist and promote yourself. And you've got to decide where on the funnel these techniques fit for you as an artist, because no two artists have the same route to success. Some artists get lucky in one area, some artists find something that is working for them and double down on it. You just have to understand the basics and then find the techniques that are going to work for you. And we've got hundreds and hundreds of videos with different techniques that you can learn. So if you're not subscribed already, do subscribe, because we do upload 3 times a week now on our music marketing channel. There are 3 parts to this funnel, from initial discovery all the way down to falling in love with the artist and developing a huge fan base worldwide. And the first one is the raising awareness. That is initially the discovery phase, that first time you hear a track from an artist. You don't even know who the artist is. You might be played on the radio and you still haven't heard who the artist is because the DJ hasn't announced it yet. It is just getting people to listen to your track. Now, what labels are very good at is getting music into places where they can bombard people with the same track over and over again, especially back when radio was dominant, because you could get a track on rotation and then people would just keep hearing a track over and over again and be bombarded with this artist until they just become a fan of that artist. There are plenty techniques available to get your music initially discovered, but you have to find something that is going to work for you and allow people to listen to your music again and again and again. Because how many times have you heard a track and fall in love with it the first time of hearing it? It's quite rare. I'd say about 10% of tracks that I hear and end up loving, I actually loved from the first time of hearing it. Usually it was on the second or third play, and you have to remember that. That is the difference. So there's no point in trying to get hundreds of thousands of Spotify streams when people are only listening to your track once. You need to get your music in places where you have the ability to get people to listen to your music again and again and again. And just a few examples of ways that you can get people to discover your music is social media ads, Spotify playlists, radio, press, blogs, support slots, anything where people will initially discover you and get introduced to you as an artist. So when you're making your marketing strategy for 2020, you have to think, how are people going to discover me? What is that initial phase? Literally get a notepad and pen and draw a funnel and say at the top, how do people discover me for the very first time? And you can do lots of trial and error, but for me, social media ads is the easiest way to get people to discover you, because you can control it, you can spend money, and you know that it's real. You know that when you see how many people have watched 50% of your video, you know that they have listened to 50% of your track. That is solid results. You don't know that if you've used a music promotion company who gets you on some Spotify playlists, even if those playlists are legit, you don't know if press or blogs are necessarily going to get you a huge amount of exposure because you don't know how big their readership is. That's why I like ads, because it is quantifiable. However, if you have, say, a strong story or an interesting angle, then use blogs, use radio, try and get yourself on podcasts, because that will be much easier, and there are a lot less artists competing for that space who have a lot less interesting stories than you do. So you have to figure out, what are your assets? What is interesting about you? And how are people going to discover you? The next stage in the funnel is taking everyone who's discovered your music and converting them into a fan. Now, major labels back in the day, how they would do it is get press and radio and potentially a few live slots on TV and get that artist to perform. And then that will get people made aware of you as an artist. And that worked really well, but the reason it worked well was because they had the influence and power to be able to get artists in those situations, knowing that they can then convert people into fans at a later date because there was less artists around. Then that means because there are less artists around, if they performed live on television and then they got some press interviews, some radio interviews, the chances are people did hear about them because there were less artists around. Now, competition is so high that the likelihood is of you being on a Spotify official playlist and then someone reading your interview in a magazine is very low. So now that you're established and people are starting to discover you, then there are now people out there who have heard your music. How are you going to then link them to you as an artist? Firstly, you need a story to tell. You need something unique about you. And people often say that's kind of a bit cliche and played out, but look at the most legendary bands in the world and legendary artists. They all have a story to tell, whether it's Lil Wayne because he was caught carrying a gun or illegal drugs and he spent some time in prison, whether it's The Who crashed a Rolls Royce into a swimming pool, or whether it's the band Oasis who had that family feud within the band. People love a story. They love to follow what the artist is about. So you have to establish your values and also your story and figure out what people are going to be able to invest in and follow. And the next thing you need to do is start to get people talking about you, which is a very similar tactic to what I've just mentioned. You need to be able to get people to meet up with their friends for a drink and say, have you heard about this artist? Have you heard what they did? And then they say, I think I heard them on the radio a couple of weeks ago. And then suddenly the link starts to form. So you need to have your own story and your own unique persona in order to convert people into fans. And you can do this by creating social media content. If you have social media content that is ongoing, it is the easiest way to tell your story and show what you are about as an artist. And the reason I love social media ads so much is it makes this whole funnel so easy for you. So a major label who's trying to break an artist before social media existed, they had to kind of like spread everything out, just get everything out there, get the music out there, and then start building the story, getting the press, getting the interviews, and just hope that the people who are listening to the interview have initially heard this artist first in order to fall in love with them on that interview. But with social media ads, you can literally put out your track to 1,000 people and then retarget them down to that same 1,000 people telling your story. You can make people discover your music, and cool, that didn't interact with it, that didn't comment, that didn't share it with friends, but they might share your story with friends. They might share one of your videos that you made behind the scenes if something happened with friends. So you've got 1,000 people you know have listened to, say, half of your track. You can then retarget them with another more interesting video which shows more about your story and more about your persona. And that's what gets people converted into fans, and that's what gets people talking. And you can do this without a music marketing company or a music PR company. You can do this this yourself just using the Facebook Ad Manager. And if you aren't sure how to use ads, then I have done a full tutorial on how to do Facebook ads. So I will link that down below if you want to watch it. And the final part of the funnel is your brand. Your brand is what keeps you there. Your brand is what keeps you in the charts. So you should have an idea at the very beginning of your career what your brand is going to be about, but that is how people identify you. You've got your story, which is more kind of long-term, needs a bit of investment, but how do people view you at a glance? And this can change as your career goes on. Many artists have changed their brand, but it's still managed to carry through because of their story and also their reputation. And the strength of a brand keeps you in the charts. It keeps you on Spotify official playlists because it reassures all the DJs and all the curators that people want to hear your music. So maybe Justin Bieber's latest track isn't that good, but someone who is curating a radio show or a Spotify playlist knows that because the brand is so strong, that people are going to want to hear that track regardless of whether it's good or not. And if you can maintain that brand and keep in the news, keep building stories, keep releasing good quality tracks, then you will remain in the charts. Even if you have one track that isn't that good, it will probably chart on the strength of your brand. So always have in mind what your brand is going to be, because that is the difference between an artist who has a long-term career and is a one-hit wonder. Because if you don't have the reputation, you don't have anything that's going to carry you through. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, do give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more music marketing videos like this, subscribe and we'll see you in the next video.